The CEO stayed single for years, rejected all rich ladies, and proposed to a widow. Before we get deep into the story, let me know in the comments section where you are watching from. Hit subscribe if you are hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's get into the story. Paul leaned back against the cold, unforgiving wall of the hospital, the weight of his circumstances pressing heavily on his chest. It was a dreary afternoon, the sky overcast, mirroring the turmoil within him. He had been sitting there for hours, a crumpled piece of paper in one hand and an empty stomach gnawing at him. His mind was a storm of worry and despair, each thought more suffocating than the last. The world felt impossibly large, and yet he was utterly alone, a young man charting the depths of hopelessness. Then she appeared, a bright spot in the grayness. A nursing student, her name was Sarah, although he wouldn't learn that until much later. She approached with a kindness that seemed to radiate from her. Without hesitation, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the last of her money, a $20 bill, and handed it to him. "Here," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "Get something to eat." There was a warmth in her eyes, a genuine concern that tugged at his heart. She offered him a sandwich from her own lunch, a simple gesture that felt monumental in that moment. He had opened his mouth to thank her, to ask her name, but before he could utter a word, she was gone, swallowed up by the stream of hospital visitors and staff. He watched her fade into the crowd, feeling a mix of gratitude and regret that he would never know the name of the woman who had shown him such kindness. Fast forward to the present, and Paul sat in his lavish office, the weight of his past feeling like a distant echo. He was scrolling through yet another stack of heiress photographs, each one representing a potential partnership, a possible escape from the emotional toll of his life. "No, no, no," he muttered to himself, crossing out another name with a quick swipe of his pen. The room was filled with the muted sounds of his assistant clicking away on the keyboard, the hum of the city outside barely reaching him. "Find me the caterer for tonight," he instructed, trying to focus on the task at hand, but the images danced in front of him, each one blurring into the next. And then, as if fate itself had intervened, he stumbled upon a familiar name, Sarah. It felt like a jolt, a shockwave that coursed through him, tearing down the walls he had built around his heart. The young woman from years ago, the one who had offered him kindness when he had nothing, now stood before him in the form of a caterer's name. His breath caught in his throat. Memories flooded back, wrapping around him like a warm embrace. The kindness of a stranger, a moment in time that had shifted the trajectory of his life. He sat there, the pen hovering above the paper, as a mix of emotions swirled within him. This was not just about finding a caterer anymore, it was about reconnecting with a piece of his past, a reminder of the humanity that had once touched him so deeply. As he leaned closer to the screen, determination ignited within him. There was a story here, one that had been waiting to be told, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to uncover it. The grand ballroom sparkled with elegance, chandeliers casting a warm glow over the sea of well-dressed attendees mingling and laughing. Paul stood slightly apart from the crowd, his presence masked behind the guise of a consultant for the evening, a role he had concocted to observe rather than participate. His heart raced, not from the thrill of the event but from the anticipation of seeing her again. Sarah moved gracefully among the guests, her focus unwavering as she navigated the chaos of the charity gala, organizing volunteers and ensuring everything ran smoothly. He admired her dedication, the way she effortlessly handled each challenge thrown her way, her smile never faltering despite the demands of the occasion. As he watched, a rude guest, a wealthy man with an air of entitlement, approached Sarah, his words dripping with condescension. Paul felt a surge of protectiveness rise within him. He stepped forward, his voice steady yet firm. "Excuse me, sir, but I believe you should treat her with the respect she deserves. She's doing an incredible job tonight." The man turned, surprise mingling with irritation on his face, but Paul held his ground, his gaze unwavering. Sarah shot him a grateful look, a silent acknowledgement that warmed his heart. There was something profoundly rewarding about standing up for her, about being a shield against the world's harshness. As the evening wore on, the gala's festivities continued, but Paul noticed Sarah growing increasingly anxious. She glanced at her watch, her smile flickering as she spoke to a colleague. When the event wrapped up, she rushed outside, her van parked in the lot, ready to whisk her away. But as fate would have it, the engine sputtered and died, the unfortunate sound echoing in the stillness of the night. Paul, watching from a distance, felt a pang of sympathy. Without thinking, he approached her, the warmth of the moment encompassing them both. "Need a lift?" he offered, his voice cutting through her frustration. She looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Oh, would you? That would be amazing." He couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm, the genuine gratitude in her eyes making the evening feel like a small victory. As they drove through the quiet streets, the conversation flowed easily, a comfortable rhythm that felt familiar despite the years apart. Paul learned about her life, her passion for nursing, and the challenges of juggling work with her responsibilities at home. When they arrived at her modest house, a burst of energy burst from the front door. A little girl with bright eyes and a beaming smile raced toward them. "Mommy! You're back." "This is Lily," Sarah introduced, her voice laced with pride. The child looked at Paul, her curiosity piqued. "Who's that?" "This is Mr. Paul," Sarah replied, her tone light. "He helped me tonight." Lily's face lit up with delight. "Mr. Paul. Do you want to come see my school play? It's going to be so much fun." Caught off guard, Paul glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to," he said, feeling a warmth spread through him. In that moment, with Sarah's grateful smile and Lily's infectious excitement, he realized that perhaps this was the beginning of something special, a chance to reconnect with the kindness that had once sparked hope in his life. Victoria Lane leaned back in her designer chair, the soft leather cool against her skin, but inside, a storm brewed. She had just overheard a conversation that twisted her insides with disbelief and anger. Paul, the man she had set her sights on, was showing interest in some caterer. The words replayed in her mind like a broken record, each repetition sharpening her irritation. How could he? How could he even consider someone like that? Her perfectly manicured nails tapped rhythmically against the glossy surface of her desk, her thoughts spiraling into a whirlwind of jealousy and humiliation. Victoria had always been the center of attention, the one who commanded respect in any room she entered. Now, she felt like a mere afterthought, overshadowed by a woman she deemed beneath her. It was unacceptable. Fueled by indignation, Victoria picked up the phone and dialed a number she knew all too well. "I need you to find everything you can on Sarah," she instructed the private investigator, her voice laced with venom. "I want to know who she is, where she came from, and any secrets she might be hiding." The investigator's voice was a low murmur of agreement, but Victoria felt a sense of satisfaction wash over her. She would uncover whatever it was that made this caterer so appealing to Paul and ensure it would blow up in Sarah's face. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Victoria, Paul was busy crafting a different narrative. After their unexpected reunion, he felt a connection to Sarah that he hadn't anticipated, and he found himself wanting to support her in any way he could. He remembered the look of frustration on her face when her van had broken down, and a thought struck him: why not help her without revealing his identity? With a few discreet phone calls and a touch of creativity, he arranged for Sarah's van repairs to be paid off anonymously. He wanted her to focus on her catering business without the burden of financial worry. It was a small gesture, but one he hoped would ease some of the stress in her life. And then, inspired by the connection they had forged, he decided to send her business a substantial catering contract, phrased as coming from a new client. When Sarah received the contract, her eyes widened in disbelief. It was a game-changing opportunity, the kind of contract that could elevate her business from struggling to thriving. Who is this mysterious client? She wondered aloud, glancing at the signature that provided no clues. But the excitement overshadowed any concern, and she felt a surge of hope for her future. As she worked tirelessly on fulfilling the order, she remained blissfully unaware of Victoria's machinations. The news of her success spread quickly, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt as though she could breathe. She poured her heart into the project, each dish a reflection of her passion and dedication. But in the shadows, Victoria's investigation bore fruit. The private investigator delivered a dossier that revealed Sarah's past, a story of resilience and struggle, but also of triumph. Victoria smirked, convinced she could twist these details into a narrative that would undermine Sarah completely. This will be easy, she thought, her mind racing with schemes to ensure Paul saw Sarah for what she truly was, a mere caterer vying for his attention. As the gala of deceit unfolded, both women stood on the precipice of change, unaware that the choices they made would soon collide in a way neither could predict. Paul's quiet support contrasted sharply with Victoria's ruthless ambition, setting the stage for a confrontation that would challenge not only their relationships but the very foundations of their lives. The auditorium buzzed with the excited chatter of children and parents alike, the air thick with anticipation. Paul nestled into his seat in the front row, his heart racing not just from the thrill of the performance ahead but also from the deep-rooted desire to be there for Lily. He scanned the crowd, his gaze searching for Sarah, but her absence gnawed at him. She had been held up at work, a constant battle for her time and attention, leaving him to bear witness to this moment alone. Yet, he was determined to support Lily, to be the anchor she needed, if only for tonight. As the lights dimmed and the curtain rose, the stage transformed into a world of magic and wonder. Lily, dressed in a vibrant costume that glimmered under the stage lights, stepped forward with a confidence that took Paul by surprise. She sang her lines with clarity and passion, her small frame radiating a warmth that filled the entire room. Paul felt a swell of pride as her voice soared, each note a testament to her spirit and resilience. He could see her looking out at the audience, scanning the sea of faces, and for a moment, he hoped she would find him, offering her a smile of encouragement. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, the performance culminated in a triumphant finale. As the final curtain fell, the applause erupted like a wave crashing upon the shore. Lily beamed, her eyes sparkling with joy as she ran toward him, her arms outstretched. In that instant, everything else faded away, the world outside ceased to exist. He caught her in a warm embrace, lifting her off the ground as she squealed with delight. "Did you see me, Paul? Did you like it?" she asked, her voice bubbling with excitement. "I loved it, Lily." "You were amazing," he replied, his heart swelling with affection. In that brief moment, he felt like a father, a role he had longed to fulfill but had hesitated to embrace fully. But then, the air shifted as he caught sight of Sarah entering the auditorium. She paused at the threshold, her expression a mixture of surprise and something deeper that stirred in her eyes. Watching the two of them together, a pang of longing crossed her face, quickly followed by the familiar walls she had built around her heart. Paul noticed her hesitation, the way her shoulders tensed as she approached. "Lily," Sarah called softly, her voice barely breaking through the echo of applause. She stepped forward, but there was a hesitance in her stride, a reluctance to cross the invisible line that divided them. "We need to talk," she said, her gaze flitting to Paul. "You can't let her get attached to someone who might leave." The words hung heavy in the air between them. Paul felt a sharp sting, a realization of the painful truth that had always lurked in the shadows of their relationship. He understood her fear, but the ache of her rejection twisted in him. Lily, oblivious to the tension, clutched his hand tightly, her innocence a stark contrast to the complexities of adult emotions that loomed over them. In that moment, Paul wished more than anything to be the father she needed, to be the man Sarah could trust. But for now, all he could do was stand there, caught in the delicate balance of hope and fear, knowing that the path ahead was uncertain. The atmosphere in Sarah's life shifted with the sudden reappearance of Marcus Webb, a specter from her past that she had hoped was long buried. His unexpected arrival came on a gray afternoon, the kind that seemed to mirror the unease settling in her chest. He approached her at the local coffee shop, his demeanor deceptively casual, but the glint in his eyes held a sharper edge. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial, "we need to talk about your late husband." Sarah's heart raced at the mention of Daniel, a name that still echoed with both love and sorrow. She had worked hard to keep the memories of their life together intact, but Marcus was intent on stirring up the past. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "He owed me money," he claimed, the words dripping with a calculated menace. "If you don't want this to go legal, I suggest you find a way to make it up to me." A chill ran down her spine. The threat was clear, and she could feel the walls pressing in around her. She had thought of Marcus as nothing more than a distant acquaintance, someone who had faded into the background after the funeral, but he was clearly not finished with her or the life she had tried to rebuild. The implications of his visit lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. As she processed his words, another layer of anxiety crept in. She couldn't afford a legal battle, nor did she want to relive the details of her husband's debts. But before she could respond, Marcus straightened up, his smirk revealing a confidence that unsettled her. "I'll be around, Sarah. We'll figure this out together." Days later, Victoria, her well-meaning but often meddling friend, thrust herself into the situation. Over lunch, she casually dropped information that made Sarah's stomach twist. "Did you know Marcus has been asking about Paul?" Victoria said, her tone too light for the gravity of the topic. "He seems to think you two are getting close." Sarah felt her heart sink. The notion of Marcus forming an alliance with someone like Paul, who had entered her life as a source of joy and stability, sent alarm bells ringing. Victoria continued, oblivious to Sarah's discomfort, "I think he's trying to use that to his advantage. You should be careful." The next thing Sarah knew, Marcus was showing up at every event she organized, his presence as unsettling as it was persistent. He would stand in the background, acting like a caring old friend, sharing stories that painted him in a flattering light. "Remember when Daniel and I," he would begin, casting Sarah in a web of nostalgia she didn't want to revisit, all while subtly positioning himself closer to her and, by extension, Paul. It was infuriating and terrifying, the way he twisted her memories into a weapon. Marcus would laugh easily, offering her support as she juggled her responsibilities, yet she could feel the ulterior motives lurking beneath his friendly facade. Each time she saw him, a knot tightened in her stomach, the sense of being cornered growing with each interaction. As she navigated this new landscape, Sarah realized she had to protect not only herself but also the fragile bond she was forging with Paul. The stakes were higher than she had anticipated, and Marcus was a reminder that some pasts refuse to stay buried. With every encounter, she felt the tension rise, knowing she needed to confront the threat he posed, both to her heart and to the new life she was desperately trying to build. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows around the dining room, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt like a haven from the chaos outside. Sarah had planned this evening meticulously, hoping to bridge the gap that had widened between her and Paul since the unsettling return of Marcus. She set the table with care, draping it in a crisp white cloth and arranging delicate flowers that had just begun to bloom. As she poured the wine, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this dinner would remind them both of the connection they had forged, a chance to rekindle the warmth they had shared. Paul arrived with a smile, his laughter filling the space like music. They exchanged pleasantries, the tension of the past few weeks momentarily forgotten as they clinked glasses and toasted to the evening. But as they settled into an easy rhythm, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She caught glimpses of Paul's phone buzzing on the table, his gaze lingering on it more than once, as if he was waiting for something important. Still, she pushed those thoughts aside, wanting to savor the moment. As dinner progressed, the conversation flowed freely, filled with laughter and stories that wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. Yet, amid the warmth, Sarah noticed a small slip of paper peeking out from the edge of Paul's jacket pocket as he leaned back. Curiosity piqued, she discreetly reached over and pulled it out, her heart sinking as she read the words printed across the receipt. It was from a high-end restaurant, one that she recognized as a place for corporate gatherings, a far cry from the consultant he had claimed to be. The total was staggering, more than she could imagine spending for a casual dinner. The revelation struck her like a cold wave, her heart racing as doubt seeped into her thoughts. Was Paul really the man he had presented himself to be? She felt the ground shift beneath her, the foundation of their relationship trembling at the edges. Anger flared within her, twisting her stomach into knots. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. "You think I'm just some charity case? You've been pitying me all this time, haven't you?" Paul's expression faltered, confusion clouding his features. "Sarah, it's not like that." Not like that?" "Then what is it?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "You lied to me, Paul. You painted yourself as someone who understood my struggles, and now I find out you're living in a different world altogether." He opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The tension crackled between them, heavy and suffocating. In a moment driven by a whirlwind of emotions, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. Outside, the cool night air hit her like a slap, grounding her in the reality of her decision. She needed space, clarity, away from the confusion that had built up like a dam ready to burst. Inside, Lily emerged from her room, rubbing her eyes, her small frame appearing fragile in the dim light. "Mommy, why can't Mr. Paul come over anymore?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. Sarah's heart broke at the sound. How could she explain the mess of adult emotions and misunderstandings to a child? "It's complicated, sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling to meet Lily's gaze. "But I promise we'll figure it out." As she held her daughter close, the weight of the evening pressed heavily on her shoulders. In that moment, Sarah realized that the truth had slipped through her fingers, leaving behind a fragile thread that threatened to unravel everything she had built. The evening air was thick with tension as Marcus stood in the shadows of Sarah's home, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had waited for this moment, the perfect opportunity to strike while she was at her most vulnerable. With her grief still fresh from losing her husband, and her confidence shattered, she was an easy target. As he slipped the carefully crafted documents into the envelope, he felt a rush of satisfaction. This would be the nail in her coffin, and he would finally be free of her lingering presence. The evidence was damning, meticulously fabricated to point to Sarah as the one who had siphoned funds from her late husband's company. It was a crime that he was all too familiar with, having orchestrated his own schemes while pretending to support her. But now, the tables had turned. He had painted her as the villain, and he would play the innocent bystander. With a deep breath, he placed the envelope in an inconspicuous spot on her desk, then retreated into the night, leaving behind only the echo of his malicious intentions. Hours later, As the moon hung high in the sky, the sound of sirens shattered the quiet suburban night. Sarah was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, trying to find solace in the routine of the mundane. She heard the commotion outside and felt a chill race down her spine. The doorbell rang, urgent and demanding. When she opened the door, the sight of the police officers standing there brought her heart to a standstill. "Miss Sarah Hartley," one of them asked, his tone professional yet devoid of warmth. She nodded, her stomach twisting with dread. They stepped inside without invitation, their presence looming like a storm cloud. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She stumbled back, disbelief and fear swirling in her mind. This can't be happening," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Just then, a terrified scream pierced the atmosphere. Lily, her daughter, had appeared at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed and confused. "Mommy," she cried, rushing down to her, but the officers moved quickly, blocking her path. "Stay back," one shouted, and Sarah's heart shattered at the sight of her little girl, panic-stricken and clutching her favorite stuffed animal. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Sarah's world collapsed. She turned to Lily, who was now screaming her name, tears streaming down her innocent face. "Lily, it's okay. I'll be right back," she forced out, but even she didn't believe it. The officers escorted her outside, the chill of the night air biting at her skin, but the real coldness came from the realization that she was being taken away from her child. A social worker arrived almost immediately, clipboard in hand, ready to assess the situation. "We may need to take Lily into temporary custody," she said, her voice clinical, as if they were discussing a piece of furniture rather than a frightened little girl. Sarah's heart raced as she fought against the overwhelming tide of despair. "No! You can't! She needs me," she pleaded, desperation clawing at her throat. But her cries were lost in the chaos, drowned out by the sirens and the weight of her impending fate. Marcus's shadow loomed large in her mind, a reminder of the treachery that had led her to this moment, and as the door to the police car closed behind her, she felt the last remnants of her life slip away. The boardroom buzzed with tension as Paul stood at the head of the table, the weight of the world resting on his shoulders. He had spent the last few days piecing together the puzzle that had shattered Sarah's life, uncovering the depths of Marcus's betrayal. Each revelation felt like a knife twisting deeper into his gut, but the time for mourning was over. It was time for action. With a steely resolve, he called the emergency shareholders' meeting, knowing that lives hung in the balance, and Sarah's reputation needed to be restored. As the room filled with murmurs of confusion and concern, Paul's heart raced. He had gathered forensic evidence, bank statements, emails, transaction records, every piece meticulously documented to expose Marcus's embezzlement. He felt the eyes of the shareholders on him, some skeptical, some anxious, but all eager for answers. He cleared his throat, the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "what I'm about to reveal will change everything." He unfolded the story, layer by layer, detailing how Marcus had manipulated the company's finances, diverting funds into his own accounts. Gasps echoed through the room, disbelief morphing into outrage. Paul watched as Victoria's expression shifted from shock to realization. The betrayal cut deep. She had believed in Marcus, had stood by him, only to discover she had been used as a pawn in his game. Panic flickered in her eyes as she glanced toward the door, contemplating escape, but Paul was quicker. "Victoria," he called out, his tone firm yet compassionate, "you need to hear this too." She froze, caught between the truth and her instincts. Paul pressed on, revealing the damning evidence, the pieces of Marcus's deceit laid bare for all to see. "You were misled, but it's not too late to do the right thing. As the reality of the situation sank in, Victoria's bravado wavered. She turned to Marcus, who sat slumped in his chair, his facade of confidence crumbling. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus's gaze darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was none. Paul seized the moment, his voice rising in intensity. "Marcus, you're not just a thief, you're a coward hiding behind manipulation. This no longer concerns you. We will reclaim this company and clear Sarah's name." The tension in the room shifted, a palpable wave of support washing over him. With a final flourish, Paul turned to the assembled shareholders, his heart pounding with purpose. "And now, I must share something deeply personal." He paused, gathering his strength. 15 years ago, when I was a lost boy, it was Sarah who saved me. You gave me hope when I had nothing. Now let me give you everything. The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled, the truth echoing through the hearts of those present. Recognition flickered in the eyes of the shareholders, and for the first time, they saw not just a billionaire, but a man driven by gratitude and love. With renewed determination, they rallied behind him, ready to rebuild and support Sarah, ready to fight for justice. Paul felt a surge of hope as he realized that amidst the chaos, he had not only uncovered the truth but had also found his purpose. The golden glow of the Parisian sunset bathed the Seine in a warm light, casting long shadows across the cobblestone bridge. Paul led Sarah and Lily, their laughter mingling with the gentle lapping of the river below. It was a month since their lives had taken a turn towards the extraordinary, a month since the chaos had faded into a beautiful new beginning. The air was filled with possibilities, and Paul felt the weight of love and hope buoying him as they strolled through the heart of the city. As they approached the center of the bridge, the world around them seemed to fade away. The vibrant colors of the sunset mirrored the emotions swirling in his chest, a blend of excitement and nervous anticipation. He paused, turning to face Sarah and Lily, who were both radiant in the soft light. "There's something I need to do," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. With a deep breath, he knelt on one knee, not just before Sarah, but also before Lily, who looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. The moment felt monumental, a transition not just of love, but of family. "Sarah," he began, his gaze locked onto hers, "I've loved you since the moment we met again, and I can't imagine my life without you. I'm not just asking to marry your mom," he continued, turning to Lily with a warm smile, "I'm asking to be your dad, if you'll have me." Time seemed to stand still. The words hung in the air, heavy with significance. Lily's face lit up, and before he could finish, she erupted into a joyful scream. "Yes! Yes!" She flung herself into his arms, her warmth enveloping him as he caught her with a laugh, feeling the pure joy radiating from her small frame. Sarah stood there, tears streaming down her cheeks, a blend of disbelief and happiness washing over her. The man she had come to love so deeply was not just making a promise to her, he was embracing Lily, too. "Paul," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "you don't know what this means to us." Paul held Lily tight, then turned back to Sarah, his heart pounding as he pulled the small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it, revealing a beautiful ring that sparkled even in the fading light. "I want to build a life with both of you, to create a family filled with love and laughter. Will you marry me, Sarah? Will you be part of my forever?" With her hands clasped over her heart, Sarah nodded, her voice breaking as she managed to say, "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." The bridge became their sanctuary, a moment frozen in time. Paul slipped the ring onto her finger, and as he rose to embrace her, Lily clapped her hands in delight, her laughter ringing out like music. The three of them stood together, a newly formed family against the backdrop of a Paris sunset, the Seine flowing beneath them, carrying their hopes and dreams into the future. At that moment, everything felt perfect. Thank you for watching and listening to the story. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe and stay tuned. We will be right back with another interesting story.